Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Nordic Climate Action Weeks here in Stockholm, and welcome to the Nordic Pavilion at the COP25, the UN climate negotiations in Madrid. And also, of course, welcome to the viewers online. Before I give the word to my colleague in Madrid, I will just say to the audience that during the event we will open up for questions, so you can prepare questions if you want. And I will also say to people who are planning to be active on social media, if you do so, please use the hashtag Nordic Climate Action. But now, without further ado, over to Madrid and my colleague, André.
Thank you, Stian. Today, at this event, we're going to talk about the ocean, part of our problems and solutions. And we're going to present some views on climate, ocean, and the cryosphere. The ocean plays a key role in regulating the climate, in slowing down global warming through absorption of excess heat and carbon dioxide. Climate change and ocean acidification are fundamentally affecting the oceans, with Arctic and subarctic areas particularly at risk. This is the two sentences that opens the Nordic Ministerial Declaration on Ocean and Climate that was signed by the Nordic ministers for the environment just 1 month ago. The reason being that all oceans, including the North Sea, is and will continue to be affected by climate change. We therefore need to act now, before the window of opportunity closes. So they say in the declaration, and they have also made a movie about the declaration and how it came to be. And Stockholm, if you would help me and just start the movie so we can see this one first, and then we go to the distinguished ministers that we have with us. Please, Stockholm, start the movie.
Vi har ikke tid til å debattere fakta som om det skulle vært meninger. Vi har ikke én dag, ikke én art, ikke ett korallrev i nord, ikke én isbre, ikke én torskebestand å miste.
We in the Nordic region are connected by the ocean. From the brackish Baltic Sea in the east to the rugged North Atlantic in the west. The ocean has secured the livelihood for the people in this region for centuries. Will it continue to do so for the next generations?
It doesn't take long before you notice something is seriously wrong with how we manage our oceans.
But one thing is what you see. The real problem is what you don't see. It is really much, much worse.
Warming of the Earth's climate system is unequivocal. The oceans have absorbed 30% of all CO2 emitted by human activity and more than 90% of the excess heat. The effects are threatening ecosystems in Nordic Sea areas. The Nordic oceans have been closely monitored for decades. The research and monitoring data allow us to keep track of the changes that are happening. Climate change has contributed to an increase in both the number and extension of dead zones in the Baltic Sea. Acidification of the ocean is a potential threat to vital marine organisms such as plankton, sea urchins, and corals throughout the region. Future consequences will largely depend on the level of greenhouse gas emissions.
With future warming of the oceans, more glaciers and sea ice will melt,
exposing more of the ocean surface to the sun, causing further warming, increased stress on ecosystems,
loss of biodiversity, and less
CO2 to be absorbed.
change of sea currents,
further acidification,
and land waves. When the ocean change, the climate change on the entire planet. Saving the oceans is saving the planet. We need to act together now.
The 30th of October 2019, the Nordic Ministers of Environment and Climate declared to cooperate to increase the resilience of Nordic sea areas to climate change and pursue efforts to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. The Nordic region will emphasize the need to decarbonize ocean industries, promote ocean-based renewable energy, and protect marine ecosystems as carbon sinks. Encourage and strengthen scientific research that will enable us to identify and maintain natural ocean carbon sinks in the Nordic sea areas. Persist in our efforts to achieve carbon neutrality. Increase our knowledge of how the Nordic sea areas are being and will be affected by climate change and ocean acidification. Recognize the effects this has on people dependent on the sea, including indigenous people and local communities. We need to use this knowledge to strengthen Nordic cooperation on adaptation to changes in the oceans.
Every day, we lose parts of our nature, our world, the one world we all depend upon to live.
Without the ocean, there would be no life on Earth. So how come we so frequently forget about our oceans when talking about climate issues?
It's especially important for the Nordic countries to do something about climate crisis. We are very wealthy countries and our lifestyle choices have made poor effects on the other world.
Because we're all part of the problem, we can also be part of the solution.
We can't beat climate change without cooperation. We have to cooperate, we have to exchange ideas and look to each other for help. We can't do it alone.
The Nordic nations can and should become a role model in leading a sustainable economy.
Right now, our generation is making this front page news every week. We can keep making this front page news and we can keep demanding action from politicians.
We need to show politicians that we are ready for change.
That we won't repeat the same mistakes again.
And together fight up to fight this problem.
I beg you to step up and take responsibility as leaders by acting on the possibilities you are handed. And by speaking to your people in ways that gives them a chance to understand that what we do or don't do right now will make the difference between life and death for so many species and life forms. We are one of them.
And that was it. Give it a hand, people. It's the kind of message that gives you the goosebumps for all the wrong reasons. So it's a great honor for me to welcome up to the stage our ministers from Norway and Sweden. No, sorry, Iceland. Gudmundur Ingi Gudbrandsson and Norway's Minister for Climate and Environment, Ola Elvestuen. Please join me here on stage. And I think I will have you here because the camera is over there. So, okay. So, gentlemen, what do you think about the movie?
It's good. It's moving.
Yeah, and a very, as you said, it's a very strong message. And the key is really that what we are not willing to do cannot be put right by future generations. That what we're losing now, it is lost. So that is kind of like the seriousness and the gravity of the situation that they are in, and that youth have understood. I mean, the changes that they've seen in the whole debate about climate change last year has been it's been driven by two sources. One is science, 1.5 degrees, IPCC report, the ice and cryosphere, and it's really science today. If you believe in science, you must be radical when it comes to the solutions that we need to achieve. And the other part, of course, is that Greta Thunberg was sitting alone outside Riksdagen just a little over a year ago, and now gathered 500,000 youth in the city just a couple of days ago, and held the most important speech at the climate summit in the UN in September. So it is a tremendous change in the global debate about climate.
I would like to ask you, Minister Gudbrandsson, to tell us a little bit about the ministerial declaration and why it came about.
Yeah, well, to begin with, the Nordic ministers for the environment, and actually our prime ministers and the ministers for cooperation, have been over the course of this year putting together different declarations that actually many of them are very much related to climate change, and some of them are specifically on climate change. So in January, our prime ministers, they came with what we call the Helsinki Declaration, which essentially aims at carbon neutrality in the whole Nordic region, in each of the countries. The ministers for cooperation, they have put together a new vision for the coming years for the Nordic, and sustainable development and climate change is at the core of that. And then in April in Iceland, we signed a declaration on supporting and calling for a global treaty on plastics and reduction of plastic pollutions, specifically, obviously, because most of the plastic ends in the ocean, geared towards the ocean. We did that in Reykjavik. And then now in October, we came up with the one that has been filmed here or given attention here. And I mean, obviously, one of the things that inspired us to do so was the work of the IPCC. And to put this forward, it's one of many measures that the Nordic region is trying to do collectively. We are trying to increase our collaboration. And when it comes to this, in particular, the science part and the monitoring. So how can we better use data collectively? I can say, for example, Iceland holds one of the longest time series on ocean acidification in the world, which is of great value to the other Nordic countries as well as the world as a whole. And by using that to tell us more about what are then the impacts on the ocean itself, etc., is of great value. But the importance of the ocean as in relation to the climate is what made us come up with this. But I know Ola has also he knows a lot about that, because It was Norway that put it forward to begin with.
That was kind of my key word to Ola Elvestuen, Norway's Minister for the Environment. As you said, Norway has been a driving force to get this declaration up and running. Could you then tell us a little bit about how Norway and the other Nordic countries could contribute to the global efforts, how this declaration could contribute to the global effort when it comes to ocean and climate change? Is there any kind of global
well, first of
footprint?
All, as you said, that we are, when you look at this, the combined science efforts that we have in the Nordic countries, of course, we have a lot of knowledge, and you have the timelines. We have been early on, so to have this knowledge and how to use it, of course, is also something that we can also show for the rest of the world, and also the cooperation that we have on managing our forests. We have our spatial plans for our oceans in the Norwegian seas that we can show also how these can be our management plans. There's also areas where we can have cooperation with other countries, and it's also to get the understanding that the preservation of our oceans, it must be a part of both how can we reduce emissions, how can we put in carbon sinks so that we can also have adaptation towards what is happening in our oceans, and of course keeping the oceans as a central part of the global food stock that we need. So for us, it's also, this is just one part we need to use as we are here working through the Paris agreements, as also our Prime Minister is leading the high panel on oceans that will give out a new report next June in Lisbon. We need also to use the Nordic cooperation on how to both limit emissions, how better preserve our oceans, and also secure how we better also can manage them in the future.
Since we have our ministers here, I would like to ask the audience in Stockholm if there are any questions for Ola Elvestuen or Gudbrandsson. Stockholm.
Thank you very much, André.
Hi, Mia.
Hi. Are there any questions here in Stockholm from the audience?
Yeah, one here. Yeah.
Hello, good afternoon. I was wondering how, I mean, the declaration is great, I read it, and it's an amazing sign, especially for the Nordics as sea nations to the rest of the world, as you mentioned. But how, as young activists and how young students, people, how do we, what makes this declaration different from, say, the Paris Climate Agreement, which had a lot of words, but what are the actual steps that you are promising in this declaration? Are you promoting events? Are you promoting projects? Are you allocating funds? What is it exactly that you're declaring here?
I don't know which one of you would like to answer that.
Well, I can start. Well, to begin with, I think, and I exactly understand where you're coming from. You're basically asking the question: are these just yet another set of words put forward to with good intentions to do good things? Well, first of all, declarations are important. Declarations are important because they are something that both the public as well as everyone who is working in the area of the declaration can refer to. So it can be powerful to have such a declaration. But on more specific notes, one of the things that we are doing in Iceland and that relates to this declaration is that we have now very recently increased our funding for research on ocean acidification, which is really important to sort of use the data, extensive data on the physical part to understand better the influences on the biological part. So I think that is one good example of at least how we have related what we are doing to that declaration. However, unfortunately, doing more research on ocean acidification will not solve the problem of climate change. That is, we need to reduce emissions. And this declaration is calling for that. And I think because we have huge challenges when it comes to the fishing sector and many other ocean-related activities, also when it comes to tourism and other activities. And therefore, to have a declaration like this on a Nordic level will help us to guide policy onwards.
I hope that was the answer to your question. Yes, it seems like it. I would like to ask the audience here in Madrid if there are any questions for the ministers here. Please raise your hand if you have one. Yes, and there we have our star of the movie, Penelope. Welcome.
Just as a part of the youth movement, I want to ask you both one question each. As I have understood it, Iceland has more ambitious climate goals than Norway. If you could wish for one thing Norway could do better climate-wisely, what would it be? And what are your thoughts and plans on the 30 by 30 target to preserve our oceans?
Yep, that was for me, right?
Yeah.
Well,
yes.
Well, I'm not sure Iceland is doing more than Norway when it comes to climate change. I think it's vice versa. But anyways, well, we have looked very much to Norway when it comes to several things. So I begin there, and mostly because of how Norway has led the transportation sector renewable energy revolution. But also interesting things that are going on when it comes to shipping. So what would I like to see Norway do better? I might not be the best judge, but if Norway could fix the shipping industry challenges, that would be really, really good for us to follow. And then next, if you would take the agriculture, then we would be happy to follow due course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one to you, Elveston.
Just ask the question and then we'll go back to Stockholm.
Yes,
come on, Penelope.
So, you know that we the youth in the youth movement won't stop fighting for our oceans. Why won't Norway sign the 30 by 30 target?
Well, what Norway needs to do, we need to increase our marine protected areas. There's no doubt about that. And then we are also now how to work towards the CBD and the convention in October in China in Kunming next year, and look at how can we increase also the efforts internationally. I think what Norway is good at is on our overall management plans. I mean, it's not about preserving 30% of our oceans. We need better preservation of 100% of our oceans. And the marine protected areas had to be one part of that overall management. So this is a discussion definitely that we will also have. There's no doubt that increased marine protected areas, that is something that we need. And we need also a better overall protection of our areas, of our oceans.
Then I think we will go back to Stockholm. Mia, are there any more questions from Stockholm?
Hi, let's see. Do we have any more questions from the audience here in Stockholm?
May I just comment? Yeah. I just want to say that we are talking about this declaration, and I don't think everybody has read the declaration. Maybe so you can find it on our website, norden.org, or you will also find it when we publish this beautiful video on Facebook and on YouTube. There will be a link to the declaration, so help yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, a little bit of promo there. Are there any more questions, or should we see if there are any more questions here in Madrid?
It looks like the audience is very content at the moment. So over to you
First
in
one to
Madrid.
the middle then. Are there any questions here from the audience in Madrid? Just raise your hand. No. You explained it so well, gentlemen.
I think there was one over
Was
there.
there?
Yeah, right?
Was there?
That
Yes,
gentleman?
behind there. Sorry. Thank you.
Hi, this is to the Norwegian minister. You mentioned the marine protected areas. Does Norway have a commitment to stop oil drilling in the Arctic and in all of the Norwegian seas if you intend to have a 100% marine protected area?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, as I mentioned, we have ocean management plans. And now it's the Norwegian seas, there are oceans, they're divided into 3 management plans. And the next one is the next spring, I will give to Parliament the next management plan for the Barents Sea. And one question and one big discussion there will be, where do you set the line? Where do you define what's that in English? I'm losing my English here. But the ice edge in our oceans, where do you set the ice zone? And that is also, where do you set the line for oil exploration or petroleum activity in the north? That will be one of the key issues in that plan.
Yes, before you will get your answer, sir. I just want to make sure that our sound technician is putting sound on our next speaker, Dr. Pörtner. So if someone could have a headset on him right away, thank you. Now, sir, Mats, if you will go back and give the microphone here, and then we will have the next question. Thank you. Come on.
So, do you have a planned end date for fossil fuel extraction in Norway?
There's no end date as such. We are our plans and our climate because our climate laws that we are to limit our emissions by at least 40% by 2030. We now have just together with Iceland, we have the same goals as the rest of the EU. So we also work for the EU to increase their ambition by 55. And we said that we are also to reduce our emissions by 90 to 95% by 2050. And there's no doubt that in a world that needs to be climate neutral by 2050, that will also affect, of course, the oil and gas production in Norway. So Norway has in many ways we have 2 challenges. One is to cut our ambitions and be leading on to that. And then, of course, we have an economy that's quite dependent on the income from oil and gas. So we need also to diversify our economy to meet that change that we all know is coming.
Yes, Mia, any questions there, or should we have Dr. Pörtner up on the stage there now?
I think everybody here in Stockholm is really waiting for Pörtner. No, wait, there we have a question.
Yeah, my name is Tina, and I haven't read the declarations, and I'm not sure if it's in it, but I wondered how you wanted to address these pollution, like where all the plastic comes from. How do you want to address the pollution problems of plastic in the ocean?
Yeah, the Nordic countries that they decided in Reykjavik that we have an agreement that we would like to have a global agreement to combat marine waste. So we are, and right now there's also the Nordic countries. We are waiting for there's a publication already to see how an international agreement could look like.
What does it need?
Yeah, what does it need? Should it entail? And then it works towards, I'm not only the Minister of Climate and Environment in Norway, I'm also right now president of the UNEA, United Nations Environmental Assembly, that will have its next session in February 2021. And one of the issues there is to see how far we could do more, we can move forward to get an agreement on combating marine waste internationally. So that is one area where we have a practical and very good cooperation.
Yes.
So if I may just add to that, the Arctic Council, Iceland now holds the chairmanship 2019 to 21, and plastics in the ocean are one of the key issues that we are addressing in our chairmanship. So one of the things that will happen at the Arctic Council level is a management plan on how we can actually work on these issues in relation to the ocean, collectively, all 8 member states. But I also really want to thank Norway for pushing the plastic agenda, if I may call it that way, or reducing the plastic agenda. And I'm really hoping that in 2021, when the next United Nations General Assembly will be held, that we will really have something that will push us forward into making a global treaty on the plastics, because this is just the sort of new big environmental global problem that is really in need to be addressed.
Thank you, gentlemen. We're gonna have a short change of scene here. We're gonna let the ministers down, and then we're gonna have Dr. Hans Otto Pörtner on the scene.
Letting the ministers
so if you would take a seat down there, stay with us. This is gonna be good.
Yeah.
Yeah. As you can see behind me here now, Dr. Hans Otto Pörtner is with me. He's the co-chair of IPCC Working Group. Working Group 2, and also section head of Alfred Wegener Institute for Marine and Polar Research. Dr. Pörtner will share with us some rather gloomy data on how our oceans are already affected by the climate change, and what we will face if we do not act. Dr. Pörtner, the scene is yours.
Thank you very much. And thanks a lot for the opportunity to bring this report to you as well, and also to Stockholm. Hello over there. I would certainly like to emphasize the changes in the ocean and cryosphere system of the high latitudes, especially of the Arctic, considering that these high latitudes are not only being affected by climate change, but they also hold some of the tipping points, some of the key uncertainties for a future climate, which if we let it go unabated, may actually go out of hand and may be difficult to control in the future. Now it's not responding.
Let me help you there. So we do it manually.
Okay, well, I can do that then. Certainly the issues are that the Greenland and Arctic ice sheets are losing mass, accelerating global sea level rise, and they're committing us to long-term global sea level rise. Arctic sea ice is declining in every month of the year and is getting thinner. And it really makes a difference which degree of global warming we go for. At 1.5, the Arctic Ocean will be rarely free of sea ice, whereas at 2 degrees, this will occur up to 1 year in 3. One of the tipping points is represented by permafrost thawing, with the potential of adding more greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. And well below 2 degrees, we will lose about 1/4 of near surface permafrost, whereas if emissions continue to increase strongly, around 70% could be lost. We are seeing impacts in the Arctic already with reduced sea ice and snow cover affecting people, and the people are already adjusting their travel and hunting activities, and will have to adapt further to the changing landscape. And their success in adapting depends on funding and the capacities of institutions to help them. Now let's move to sea level rise and what the report tells us about that. There you see the melting and the contributing elements, and we are comparing 2 extreme scenarios, one that keeps us far below 2 degrees, sort of close to 1.5, and the other one with unabated emissions, represented by the reddish line, and the ambitious emissions reduction one, represented by the blue line. And you see how the contributors to sea level rise, Greenland ice sheet melt, Antarctic ice sheet melt, are responding. to the warming signal and pushing sea level rise. The mountain glaciers are also contributing to this, and the ocean is taking up heat, causing expansion of the water body, also contributing to sea level rise. The interesting thing is that depending really on future climate change and the global mean surface temperature reached, we have the choices between either keeping sea level rise below 1 meter over time until 2300, or letting it go on unabated, reaching several meters by 2300. But the uncertainty range is huge because, again, there is a tipping point involved, and the tipping point of the ice sheets is currently not well known with respect to its responses to global mean surface temperature. What does this mean? The melt also means that on top of this change in mean sea level, historical extreme events will have to be considered, and the frequency of those will increase. An event that has been historically rare, once per century, could become one that actually is observed once per year. And these trends are relatively strong. If you look at the next slide, we will see that actually the dark dots represent those places where this will happen during the first decades of the next century. And this is mostly in the lower latitudes, reflecting that the ice sheet in Greenland and so forth is holding, and as it is melting, is losing its attraction to seawater, and thereby sea level rise in the north is not as strong, but the lower latitude places will be affected even with highly ambitious emissions reduction. So, one back, please. The summary says we have already sea level rise, we have already 15 centimeters. One more. Yeah, that one.
That one?
Sea level is currently rising more than twice as fast and will further accelerate, reaching up to 1.1 meter in 2100 and several meters in 2300. And extreme sea level events will become more common. Now, there depends on the place how people are able to react to it. And here we have 4 places compared. One of them is more a generic category, like the resource-rich coastal cities like New York, or then comparing large tropical agricultural deltas or Arctic communities or urban atoll islands. And you see, especially the low-lying coasts in the Arctic and the urban atoll islands, they are the most vulnerable. And this risk assessment uses a color code, which goes from white, undetectable risk, yellow, moderate risk, red, high risk, and purple, very high risk. And you see a comparison of sort of present adaptation efforts with very high adaptation efforts indicated by the capital R in the right-hand column. And these rich cities have possibilities to keep risk low, even under high emission scenarios, indicating by the reddish field at the top, whereas the deltas find it more difficult, Arctic communities find it more difficult, and urban atoll islands find it extremely difficult. And this means there's a limit to adaptation in those places. The dark green areas indicate where adaptation capacities may be sufficient, whereas the yellow areas, the light green areas, actually indicate where people have to move and abandon these places.
Should we try this again?
Yeah.
No.
No, please move on.
Okay.
Now, there is also changes in marine life to be considered. Move on. And here we see the key processes of climate change in the ocean. That's warming, that's ocean oxygen decline, and that's ocean acidification. And again, it depends on the degree of climate change, to what extent these will be developing. What we already know is that changes in the oceans cause shifts in fish populations, and these will come with risks to nutritional health and food securities in those places that lose the fish, and that especially in the lower latitudes and their artisanal fisheries. Management can help, reducing pollution would help, and also moving towards sustainable fisheries would help, establishing marine protected areas in there and safeguarding their productivity would also help. There is to be considered for the Arctic then that actually There is a loss of habitat range and foraging success for ice-associated mammals and seabirds, for Arctic life, as temperatures are rising, and there is a pressure from subarctic and temperate zone fauna to move into the Arctic. There is a disrupted access to hunting and fishing areas for Arctic residents, including indigenous populations, and they can at the moment respond possibly to the subarctic fauna moving in that is actually increasing the fisheries productivity as we currently see in the Barents Sea. But this may be a transient phenomena depending on the degree of climate change, and that would need to be considered for the future. Now let me summarize this report. We talked about glacier melt, snow cover reduction, sea ice melt. We talked about the sea level rise and the changes in the ocean body like heat content, drop in pH due to ocean acidification, drop in ocean oxygen. All of these affects our life-sustaining units from the top of the mountains to the depths of the oceans. And these changes have been triggered and they will be continuing for generations to come. But it's in our hand to what extent we allow the full severity of those changes develop. Coming to the conclusion side, staying for minimizing impact severity and associated risks. Every bit of warming matters, each year matters, and each choice matters. And closely following 1.5 degree emission trajectories matters in order to meet the Paris Agreement. And this certainly, and this is a bottleneck in the current discussions, and I think the political discussion that we've just heard reflects that a little bit. Political and society will are key in this issue. And with that, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Pertner. Likewise, your PowerPoint executive has been very
Thank you very much.
Okay, we will now welcome to the stage to our keynote listeners. The first is Helene Ågren, who is the Swedish ambassador for the ocean. And then we have Lisa Kuprakoluk. I pronounced that wrong, I know. Lisa, please come up. Lisa is the vice president of the...
I'm going down.
No, please stay.
Okay.
Please stay. Lisa is actually the vice president of Inuit Circumpolar Council in Canada. And you will provide some views on what you have heard so far. Lisa, should we start with you?
Sure.
Yes.
Thank you for this introduction and for the presentations that have been very informative and I'm very sure very useful moving forward. You have mentioned in some of your presentations the importance of including indigenous knowledge. So I reiterate it here, especially because we are, as Inuit, marine people. We live all along coastal areas and therefore we are part of the marine ecosystem. So the protection of our marine environment is really important because our activities, our cultural activities, our language are all related to our traditional harvesting, subsistence activities. So the food security aspect, that's really, really important for us as we rely on marine mammals in marine water. So when we look at research and monitoring, we repeat that the inclusion of indigenous knowledge is very important when doing research and monitoring. So an example of participating in a decision-making process is at the International Maritime Organization. So Norway mentioned that it's going to be really important to get the shipping industry to get in line more with perhaps green technology. And so not only that, but we want to see the mitigation of the risks to the damage of the marine environment by ships passing through Arctic waters So we really need to participate in discussions that relate to rules, regulations that touch upon Arctic waters. Another aspect, another point I would like to mention is the importance of creating conservation areas. And Inuit Circumpolar Council has done an initiative to create Pikiala Suksua. This is a Palinja. It's called the Great Upswelling in Inuktitut. That is an area of water, the ocean between Canada and Greenland. And so the Inuit have been consulting with the Inuit communities for the creation of this and have come up with 3 recommendations. And that is Inuit to participate in the management of this conservation area and to also have the research and the management be Inuit-led. There are a couple of recommendations, but I won't get into them right now. But absolutely, it's one of the things that we are doing as Inuit to really mitigate the challenges that we are facing of the impacts of climate change in our area. Another wonderful example I would like to mention is there was a quick mention in the movie of the creation of renewable energy sources, and that's going to become very important, especially in high remote areas that are not connected to the grid. And so some youth are really making some movement forward to, for example, in one community nearby where I come from, are working to create a hydroelectric dam so that they can become more independent and less dependent on fossil fuel sources of energy. There is a mine in Nunavik that has been running for about 20, 25 years now, perhaps 30 years. And they've worked to create windmills that help reduce their dependency as well on fossil fuels because of their operations that are really huge. So there's a lot of work happening right now, although very minimal. We need more of these types of projects to be happening in the Arctic so that we can continue to protect our oceans and marine ecosystem. Thank you.
Okay, then I pass the word over to Helene Ågren, the Swedish ambassador for the ocean.
Thank you. Well, we have heard now about the severity of the problem and the role the ocean plays in climate regulation, in water circulation, and we have also heard about the scientific report stressing the urgency of the issue and the risks we are facing. So the ocean is, on one hand, you could say, a victim to climate change and other stressors. And then following that, there's a lot of people at risk from the decline of ocean health. But the ocean could also be part of the solution. This has also been mentioned in different sectors, like reducing emission in ocean-based industries like shipping and promoting renewable energy from waves, tidal energy, temperature gradients, etc. So we need a lot of research there. But also looking at the ocean, when 80% of pollution comes from land and ends up in the sea, adding as stressors, not only plastics, but chemicals and nutrients, and together with the warming ocean, which further multiplying these stresses. Deoxygenation, for example, is an effect of both combination of excess flow of nutrients into the ocean, but also the fact that the ocean is warming. So you get these combined effects. So what we have been doing in handling different problems is compartmentalize the Earth system. So we are handling biodiversity in one place and climate in another place and pollution in a third place. And it's more and more obvious that we really have to look at this. How are these stressors combined? How can we handle actions in a more holistic view? So I think that is happening now. We have the Agenda 2030 and the 17 Goals for Sustainable Development, and it really talks about handling this together. So we must try and see all these linkages and look for synergies and really push further actions. So this is what's happening, for example, now at this Blue COP, looking at the fact that the ocean has been neglected so far to a large extent in the climate discussions. But that is also about managing expectations then, because this treaty was designed and the way different issues are handled, it's not the only solution for the ocean. We have to work in many, many ways. But we do hope that this COP will end up with a strong signal that we have to look at the linkages stronger, we have to discuss the effects in the ocean and the ocean also as a solution.
Thank you, Helene. We are a little over the schedule here. So Mia, do we have time for a couple of questions, or should we move on and take the questions at the end?
I think we have room for 1 or 2 questions, if there are any. What about Stockholm? Do you have any questions?
I might have one.
Yes.
I'm Stian Fjellal. I work at the Nordic Council of Ministers. I was just wondering, Helena, if you could elaborate on. You said that the oceans has been neglected so far in the climate discussions. In what way? What does this mean?
Well, it has been discussed to some extent, but not to the extent that actually the weight of the ocean and the significance of the ocean in climate regulation and what it could mean. So based on the IPCC report and the most recent science, we need to look at the result of that and how it is discussed when we are talking about the work program on adaptation. What else do we need to strengthen efforts when it comes to coastal and ocean areas? When it comes to the technology transfer and capacity building, what do we need to do in terms of ocean-related actions and new technologies, and how could that, which might be developed in the north, but the need to apply it might be more in the south. So how can we strengthen that type of collaboration, and what mechanisms are there within the convention, the Paris Agreement, and all the rules decide afterwards? So we need to look at that and see how we can strengthen the connection.
Do we have time for a question here in Madrid as well? Mia?
Yes, we do. Take 1 more question and then we'll be back here at the back door.
Now I'm kind of hoping there is a question here. Anyone have a question? You might also answer or ask a question for Dr. Pöttner? No? We have one brave minister.
Yeah, well, thank you all for your contribution here. My question goes to you, Lisa.
Yes.
You mentioned the idea of the of the Inuit community to create a protected area in the ocean between Canada and Greenland.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what the aims of that are? What specifically are you targeting in protecting when it comes to protection? And since you mentioned that you have talked about this with the communities, how are you foreseeing the governance of that area? Is that in any way home rule, you can put it that way, or the sort of conventional top-down governance as we know from most, but not all, thank God, national parks?
Right, yes. That's a good question. So the Polynya, the Pikiela-sur-Soire, it's called the Great Upswelling because it remains unfrozen year-round, even in winter. Therefore, it's a very important marine area for reproduction, for marine mammals. It's a very important source of subsistence for us. And this area is shared between the Inuit of Greenland and the Inuit of Canada. And before there were political boundaries created, for sure, Inuit were traveling back and forth in these areas and are actually related to each other between Greenland and Canada. And hence, it's important as a traveling area. So one of the goals is to be able to have free mobility between these two areas, but also to protect the marine mammals in this area from mitigations of climate change, from shipping activities, any possibility of spills of heavy fuel oil in this area. And the other goal is to have an Inuit-led management, of course, in collaboration and partnership with the governments. And so the two governments are now working together to begin implementation of this creation of the Pikiela-sur-Soire Conservation Marine Area. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I think we go to Stockholm now because Mia, you also have exciting guests.
Yes, we do indeed. But first I would like to say very much welcome to all the 1,400 viewers out there and to everybody in Madrid. Thank you very much for all these very interesting topics and facts that you've been presenting. If you want to find out more about what's going on here, just go to norden.org or follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Now, I won't say much more than very much welcome to you, Marianne Olsen. You're from the Nordic Ocean Climate Group and Senior Advisor at the Norwegian Environment Agency. And you will talk more about this climate superhero called ocean.
Yes, thank you very much, Mia. I'm going to talk a little bit about the role of the oceans in the climate system. If we want to understand how climate change are affecting us, we need to understand the whole climate system, oceans included. In fact, there is only one ocean because they're all connected. And it's huge. It covers over 70% of the Earth's surface. It has a great capacity in absorbing heat from the sun. Here you see the Atlantic Ocean and some warm water surface currents indicated with the red and yellow and green. The ocean distributes this heat all around the globe. And it has also a capacity to exchange gases with the atmosphere, such as carbon dioxide and oxygen and moisture. The ocean is indeed a climate superhero because since the 1970s, it has absorbed more than 90% of the excess heat from human activity. It has also, since the Industrial Revolution, taken up more than or about 30% of the carbon dioxide from human activity. And because of the ocean and this absorbing of human emission of carbon dioxide, we can thank the ocean because the average temperature would have been 2 degrees higher than it is today if it hasn't been for the ocean. So thank you, ocean. And here you see the Earth seen from space, a little bit simple, but notice that the sun is hitting the Earth. And what I want to show you here is that the equator received the most of the heat from the sun, and the poles received the least, and that's why they're covered in ice. And this temperature differences is important because it sets the winds and the ocean in motion. You also see the albedo effect is an important factor, where light surfaces will reflect sun rays back into the atmosphere, while dark surfaces, such as the ocean, absorb it. We have also indicated the polar jet stream here with a blue band. That's an important, strong wind system in the zone between the cold polar air and the warmer mid-latitude air. So the force behind that jet stream is the temperature differences. At the equator, the air gets warmed up and it starts to rise. It gets lighter and rise up. And then on the northern hemisphere, it will continue northwards until it cools down again, sinks and flow back by the ocean surface. And this is a regular wind pattern. This is an important part of pushing the surface and starting to move the water, and it's an important part of setting ocean currents in motion. So the wind and the ocean is in collaboration. Here you see the Earth again with a little bit more human activity. And I'm not going to go into details about the greenhouse gas effect, but we need to know that emitting CO2 and methane, the carbon or the greenhouse gases, we will increase the temperature in the atmosphere, but also in the ocean. Here you see a map of all the ocean currents in the world, both the warm water currents and the deeper cold water currents. And you can look at this at heat conveyor belts, distributing heat all over the world. And in fact, this heat conveyor belt is responsible for some of the climate zones in the world. And here in the northern area, it's actually responsible for the mild climate that we have here, because without the Norwegian Atlantic current, we would have the same temperature here as on Greenland, and Greenland is covered under an ice cap. An important driving mechanism of these currents is that at the poles, the water cools down, gets heavy, and sinks down to the ocean floor and follows the ocean floor back. So there is two important mechanisms driving the ocean currents. It's the wind, and also that at the poles, both at the Arctic and the Antarctic, it will cool down and push the water upwards to our region. The ocean is also an important part of the carbon cycle. That is because the ocean has the ability to absorb, but also release and transport and store CO2. It stores the CO2 through its marine vegetation. Here you see some seagrass, but it also stores through kelp and seaweed, and also marine plankton. This is unicellular microscopic organisms or plants. If the vegetation isn't grazed upon, it will be transported to the ocean floor, and if it's not decomposed by bacteria, it will become part of a long-term carbon storage. So the ocean is in fact the biggest carbon storage in the world, the ocean floor. And this is actually the same storage that we tap into through our petroleum activity. And we also need to understand how the Arctic climate has a global significance. Here you see Chicago in January this year. They had an extreme cold period. And scientists believe that this was because of the weakening of the polar jet stream that I mentioned. It's a strong wind, because when the Arctic is changing and the temperature between the poles and the mid-latitude becomes more or less the same, the jet stream will weaken, and it won't be able to push the weather along the northern hemisphere, and we can experience more extreme weather, like here in Chicago. And if you'd like to learn more about this topic, or also how we are changing the ocean, you can scan our QR code. Oh, yes. We have a story map on our website that we can probably publish online afterwards, where you can learn more about how the ocean is changing. So, thank you.
Thank you. So there we have the superhero, the climate hero, Mr. Ocean, and the QR code so that you can get more information about this story map that Marianne just told us about. Before we open up for questions here in Stockholm and also in Madrid, and I would like to say that during these few minutes that you held your presentation, we now have 1,700 followers. So welcome all you 300 new viewers. I would like to say very much welcome also to you, Anna Madlener. You are a master student in engineering robotics at KTH here in Stockholm, and you have a special passion, right? You are bringing the ocean closer to society through arts. Could you just give us a brief description of this passion and also other things that you're doing currently?
Yes, well, I'm trying to do what you said. Yes, so I am currently in my second year of my master's program in robotics here at KTH. And throughout my undergraduate studies in Germany, actually, but stemming more from my childhood, I have a big passion for the ocean. And one thing that really drove me throughout my engineering education is that as engineers, but also scientists, we speak about our work as if we were speaking only to other engineers and scientists, and therefore really lack a clear and attractive way of bringing what we are passionate about to the society who are working on other very interesting and intense things other than the ocean. And I personally think, or have already experienced, that everyone I meet loves the ocean. There's not a single person I've met who doesn't. And many people, unfortunately, don't know of all this superhero power that it has. And that is because of the complex way it's communicated often. So the motivation to tackle this through art really came from 2 fellowships I was lucky enough to have. 2 years ago, I went to the Institute of Technology and Society in Rio de Janeiro for 3 months to really research how digital technologies have a responsibility from us engineers, but also have a possibility to actually connect society more through the ocean, to the oceans, and also leverage possibilities to protect them. And then last year, I was an Ocean Discovery Fellow at the MIT Media Lab, which hosted the annual National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Associations Conference on Oceans, which they have annually in the States. And that was the first time it was not particularly focused on a scientific topic, such as data science and oceans or similar, but on how arts and social sciences actually help transmitting the message that we are trying to transmit. And from then I started an event which has until now happened once and will happen again next week and in 2 months here in Stockholm, where we use deep sea footage that has been collected through ocean robotics, which is what I'm passionately working on and studying on, and the ocean sciences, together with sounds from the ocean, and accompanied by improvised cello and flute music, or music in general, to kind of talk about, to kind of show what we are as professionals working on the ocean feeling when we work on it. But the idea of that is really to show all the beauty and all the intense powers of the ocean through a universal language. And also for engineering in general, I am passionate about how we can work on better communicating what we do.
Thank you very much, Anna. I know that you, Marianne, you are coordinating the new group, the Nordic Oceans and Climate Group, and you're very focused on communicating what we're doing here in the Nordics and also like enlightening the role that the ocean have. What do you think about what Anna just told us here about how to use arts?
I think that's very interesting, because I do feel that we are not really good at reaching out the understanding of how we're affected by climate change for people who are non-experts. And where are the people that are non-experts? How can we reach out to them? And through maybe music and art and another way of talking in a level that people understand, that is an important job for the Nordic cooperation, I think.
Thank you very much, Marianne and Anna. Do we have any questions for Anna and Marianne in Madrid? André? Well, we have the information that the Madrid video is waiting in some kind of room. I don't know what kind of virtual room that is, but I'll just turn to this room. What about Stockholm? Do we have any questions to Anna and Marianne? Then I have one to you, Anna. How do you think sustainability and ocean-relevant topics could be more integrated in, for example, engineering and higher education?
I think I'm using an example already here in KTH, which I think is quite inspiring and a positive sign. They are actually working on integrating sustainability profiles to every master program, at least at the electrical engineering and computer science master programs. And for this coming academic year, it's the first time that on the KTH website, we actually see 3 sustainability goals associated with this master's program, kind of describing which of them they tackle mostly. And then it kind of depends on the program. They have also implemented seminars and courses how to actually educate engineering students on sustainability. But one of my criticisms on that, for example, is that most of the teaching professionals, the professors and the teaching assistants, don't actually have that education yet on how to properly do it. And one of the challenges is how to educate on sustainability without losing the important engineering things we also have to learn. So I think that by, for example, implementing more project-based courses, that could be a huge step to really incentivize us as students to think about this and to talk about it, to have seminars that actually get us credits to talk about what the possibilities could be.
Thank you very much, Anna. What about Madrid? And André, we can now see you again.
Thank you. And now we can hear you. We had some interesting sounds there for a few seconds. Yes. You want to know if there's any questions?
Yes. We have a few minutes, 2 minutes to be exact.
Yeah. Is there any question from the audience here in Madrid to the people there in Stockholm, or maybe to some of our guests here on which we had on stage? It doesn't seem to be any questions, Mia.
Well, thank you very much, André. Then it's time for us here in Stockholm and also for you, André, in Madrid, to say very much thank you to all the viewers that's been following us during this live broadcasted backdoor streaming event here in Stockholm and also in Madrid. Do you have any finishing words, André?
I just want to say thank you, Stockholm, for an interesting presentation, and thank you for being with us this evening. Thank you.
And thank you. And stay tuned, because here you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and find out more on norden.org. And there will be more live broadcasting during this week.